another episode of Fujoshi Commentary, your go-to place for anime and manga, yaoi facts, recommendations, and reviews. All done by yours truly. So today I'm going to give you basically a yaoi reading. It's the new project I've been working on. Basically it's like an audible read where I read different yaoi novels and transfer them onto video. I noticed there's not a lot of yaoi novels that are being audibled, which sometimes you just want to read about the delicious yaoi men's rubbing together while you're doing chores or at home or simply just contemplating whether or not your love for gay men is ever valid. So without further ado guys, stay tuned for this video and you will get your delicious part 1 of chapter 1 of your yaoi read. So if you let me know in the comments how I did, give it a like or dislike, just give me feedback. It's my first time doing it and I really want to see if I can improve or if it's something for me. So without further ado guys, let's get grooving humans! Bye! Ai No Kusabi. Original novel by Yoshihara Reiko. The illustrations used in this video are by Michihara Katsumi, and the Japanese translation and scanning is by Shibriri. Chapter 1. The Man Who Came Back. Strangers. All was dark, but it was not a distressing darkness. It was a darkness in which the silhouette of things could be distinguished. All was calm. The air conditioner, which usually made a pleasant atmosphere, wasn't working, but the air was wavering, disturbed. From the bed situated in the corner of the room came a rustling of sheets. A shadow was shivering and moving back and forth. His eyes had the look of one who could not sleep peacefully, as if his dreams had been often interrupted. No, that was not it. He was sleeping, and he was not able to get up. In order to prevent him from moving, both wrists had been firmly shackled over his head. His outstretched arms were trembling slightly. Perhaps due to his impatience at not being able to free himself, he kept his hands fisted tightly. Nevertheless, he didn't seem to have the spirit or desire to free himself at any cost. Was it because he had given up already, or was it just he was tired of struggling? That was not the expression to be read on his face. Now and then, he couldn't avoid letting a low moan escape him. He doubled up on his body, bending his knees as he raised his head. He made terrible sounds, as if he were desperately resisting an unbearable pain. However, underneath those sounds, his voice oozed a terrible, libidinous charm, as if he were breathing sweet sighs into someone's ear. Damn you! Shit! As his violence of his rising pulse made his throat spasm. Occasionally he spat such poison from his mouth. Having abandoned stubbornness and pride, having no shame or sense of honor remaining, he seemed ready to burst into tears at any moment, and to reprimand himself, he bit his lip until it bled. How much time had passed since he had been forced to take sexual stimulant? He had lost all concept of time. In reality, only 10 minutes had passed, but it seemed to him that there had been over an hour. The muscles of his inner thighs were tensed with pain. His feet were trembling convulsively. His incoherent sighs kept on, causing him thirst. His strained hips burned almost to the point of numbness, ready to explode. He shook violently as his veins would rupture into pieces. He couldn't stand it any longer. He was going mad with the need to come as hard as he could, but he was prevented from doing so by the ring which tightened around him, obstructing his ejaculation. A few minutes later, the room's door creaked faintly and slid open. However, consumed by the madness burning deep inside his body, he was barely aware of what went on around him, and he didn't notice that the man had just come in. The man approached slowly. His bearing was refined and elegant, as if a thick carpet was absorbed in his presence. Silently, the man touched the switch near the bed, and instantly the room was filled with a bright light. The man on the bed half closed his eyes, blinded by the sudden brightness, and there was another man, beautiful, but with a beauty that reflected not frailty or indulgence, but a great acumen. When he looked at him, he couldn't help the tears that spilled from his eyes. The tension, having already reached its limit, seemed to give way in the instant he looked up at the man's face. "How is it? Does it hurt a little?" The man had a strange voice that sounded soft, but at the same time strongly coercive to anybody who listened. "Please, no more," The man on the bed begged, choked with tears, but the other remained impassive. I told you to get along with the others, but at no time did I tell you to mount a female. Despite the man's soft voice, he looked into eyes chilled to the bone. Mimiya already has a male pet to pair with her. I believe you knew that, didn't you? Raoul came to me, furious, saying that you had spoiled everything. For all that, I think that it's only natural that I punish you. Did you really think you could have Mimiya or whoever you wanted? Every game has its rules, doesn't it? At that moment, unexpectedly, a teeny feminine voice cut through from behind the man's back. It's not a game! Startled, the man on the bed cringed, and there was Mimiya, with whom she had met secretly so many times. He looked at her astonished. She insisted on being allowed to see you. She says that the love is blind, but you don't have the right to choose, and it seems that you don't understand that. So tell her clearly from your own mouth. What does he... His frightened eyes seemed to inquire. Perhaps he knew what the man would say next. Is it not true that it made no difference to you if it were Mimiya or someone else? That all that you were interested in was a body to use, no matter whose it was? Or is that isn't so? A shiver crept up his back. He could never be allowed to deny it. That low voice paralyzed him, and the man's face was hard. He lowered his eyes heavily. That was a catalyst that would cause Mimiya's sudden outburst.
That's a lie! Isn't it? Everybody knows that we're going to be kept separated, and you don't know who Raoul has chosen as my partner? Jania, supposedly because he has a pedigree. It's disgusting. The sex maniac's only qualification is his face. The thought of bearing his son makes me sick. You don't want any more but me, do you? The only one you love is me, right?
But although her words were full of emotion, not even half of them reached his ears. He was concentrating on all his strength on trying to keep her from noticing what so shook him. So he writhed and bit his lips to repress any moan. Mimiya had only been told that as the relationship had been discovered, he was being punished. Believing himself at the top of his class, he had committed the error of putting his hands on an academy-born virgin. This was the gibe in everyone's mouth. However, it had been Mimiya who had seduced him. She was bothered by the thought that he was suffering for her guilt, but he who only days ago had looked at her with affection now turned his back on her without explanation. To Mimiya, this was the most unbearable. His silence fed her nervousness, and it soon became fury. Her chest ached with all the feelings rolling inside. Unable to bear it any longer, Mimiya shouted hysterically, "Why are you so quiet? Why don't you look at me? Answer me!" When she realized that not even in this way would she even get a fleeting glance from him, she knit her beautiful brows and bit her red lips. The back of who he had not even tried to deny his words suddenly seemed to her to be the marked by ugliness of treachery. At the limit of aspiration, words also failed. This was what her eyes seemed to reflect. "It's over," murmured the man's voice from his chest.
"Coward!"
The desperate shout came from Mimi's lips. He felt as if fire were burning his back, and he bit his lip harder. But what he was repressing so desperately, the sounds of his panting breaths, or maybe his own tears? Perhaps he didn't know. Behind him, Mimi's lips trembled, and as he had done to do to her, she turned and gave him her back. "This has probably been a lesson to you too," the other man said to her. Mimiya left the room, walking quickly. After assuring that she had left, the man sat down calmly on the edge of the bed. "Well, after all, I should think you must have expected such an outcome," as the imperturbable man whispered. He gradually pulled back the sheets. He awaited the revelation of the naked body of the one who lay there. Even in spite of the adolescent's wild appearance, the perfect proportions of his limbs made him terribly sensual. The man let his eyes roam slowly. There was no excitement or discomfiture. In the frozen serenity of his eyes, it was dispassionate glaze. But when his eyes reached the place between the other's legs, they darkened for a moment. The young man's erection throbbed, and his mind grew only one thought. I want release. Please, let me go. Do you want me to release you? The other man whispered softly, temptingly. The one on the bed nodded vigorously, and carelessly the other man's hands separated his knees. He held his breath. It meant, at last, an end to the anguish that was driving him mad, he thought. But teasingly the man's fingers turned suddenly aside to caress the body formed by his legs. Unconsciously, he opened his eyes wide, startled. You have been doing it with Mimiya behind my back. Did you think for one moment that it would be over so easily? For the first time, a shadow of terror crossed his eyes. The other man always seemed so serene. Whatever happened, the man's voice never showed even the slightest harshness, but he knew better than any other how passionately violent was the man hidden under that mask. But even so, he had not been repentant, thinking, why did I do that? Instead, he had shown a defiant face when the man found out about his relationship with Mimiya. He liked Mimiya, her splendid features, even in spite of the arrogance type of her breeding in a pure environment. He really liked her. She was not prejudiced against him like the others. She had been the only friend, but he knew that part of that secret pleasure he got from his meetings with Mimiya was electrifying excitement of betraying that man. I'll worry about it if I'm caught. Thinking this way, he made matters seem less important. The regret he had felt was more for Mimiya than for the man, but now he was cowed. I only did it once with Mimiya. Though he knew that the man in front of him was not that sort of person who would accept such a clumsy excuse, he was so frightened that he couldn't help trying to justify himself. Once or 100 times, it is the same to me. You did it with Mimiya, that is enough. The man stroked him lightly with creeping fingers. That you did it here is what pleased you the most, isn't it? He moaned weakly when he felt the touch of a foreign body sinking gradually inside him and wriggling lewdly. He couldn't repress the sounds of his suffocated breaths any longer. What's the matter with you? There's no point in trying to pretend now. Why don't you moan openly? The man's voice was so soft it gave him the shivers. Every time the man's finger moved, the continuous ache spread suddenly. Unconsciously, he contracted his inner muscles. It was not that he rejected the foreign digit inside his body. On the contrary, he pressed himself against it and gave short thrusts of his hips as if encouraging to go deeper. That's it. Good boy. When the whispers caressed his ear and flowed down the nape of his neck, he was startled, and he arched his body backwards, losing a small, pitiful cry. The tension which was biting into his very marrow, his bones, showed its fangs and rushed up to his head. Every time this happened, his body shook with convulsive spasms. When the man's deeply inserted finger pressed that certain point, he became breathless. It was as if he felt every vein in his body were aflame. If the intense sensation would make him faint, it would be all over then. But the man forced him to pant lewdly and heavily without letting him come. He sighed harshly, through trembling lips and a tight throat, thrusting his hips furiously. At the tip of his erection clung a sticky thread of precum, and whenever a almost sobbing cry escaped him, more of that essence dripped weakly from him. Something in this man's skilled caresses made them irresistible. As the man shoved his 2 fingers to open and stretch that place even more, he begged, gasping, "Forgive me," again and again as if he were delirious with a fever. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video. If you found this video to be entertaining or informative, feel free to give it a like. If not, dislikes are fine too. If you like more yaoi, anime, and manga videos, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I try to put out at least 2 videos every week. So until next time guys, peace, love, and stay groovin' humans. Bye!